So we're running quick today, so I'm going to run through some ideas very quickly with you. But just to give you some context, I do run an organization called Happy Sandpit. I founded that about 3-4 years ago now. Our job as an organizational culture consultancy is, it's fundamentally to look at things from the business point of view rather than the psychological point of view. I'm not an organizational psychologist, I'm an entrepreneur. And to look at the way, as far as I'm concerned, the job is to create environments where happiness is possible in the first place at work. And from there, we can start to build on that. Now, the reason I came to this very simply is about 3 or 4 years ago, no, maybe a little longer ago than that, 6 or 7 years ago, I hired the worst employee in the universe. It wasn't that funny at the time. We had a relatively small business. We were punching way above our weight. We were doing really remarkable things, and we thought we were really good at this. And then we added an employee who just brought in doom and destruction and politics and backbiting, and all sorts of things began to happen. And anyway, we got rid of her. It was unpleasant. It went to the CCMA. We lost. I'd do it again. Probably shouldn't say that in this room. But in the aftermath, I was left with 2 crucial questions. The first one was this: because I didn't do anything different in terms of how I'd hired this one and how I'd hired all of the others, there must be something wrong with how I was hiring. In other words, I didn't think it was simply fair to blame the employee when I was the one who'd hired her. I was doing something wrong. The second thing was that if it was possible for there to be those sorts of challenges within our walls, there might have been something wrong with the way we built the business in the first place. And so I went out looking, and I went through the business schools, I went online, I went everywhere I could to try and find how South African businesses build employee engagement. And I just couldn't find the case studies, and so I ended up going out and creating them, which was that book right there. Some of the things I'll tell you about are in the book right now, but I'd love to be able to talk to you much longer about this, because you would be absolutely amazed at how brilliant some South African businesses are and how brilliant leaders actually can be. We think that some of the greatest ideas about employee engagement come from overseas, and we are dead wrong. There's some genius all about us here. But the problem with it is, let's just deal with one thing before I go into that. The word happy, right, is the biggest word on the cover of the book, and it gets me into some trouble. Because I get told by people, I don't want you to go around making my people happy. I want them to work. And we all know, happy people will be happy people no matter what you do to them. Whereas miserable people will be a bunch of whiny bastards no matter what you give them. So arguably the case for trying to make people happy is a flawed one, and actually what we should be looking at is trying to create environments where that happiness can take place and then find people who fit those. And that's the angle in which we come from. The problem is we don't create organizations like that generally. What happens, organizations get built by entrepreneurs. Investec was one of the companies I spent quite a lot of time with, was built by 3 guys around a dining room table in an apartment in Orange Grove in 1983. That's how it originated. They all start from nothing. And these companies largely are built by people who are tired of being where they are, tired of the rules, tired of the regulations. I mean, they hate their boss, right? That's a big reason people leave. They go out into the world to start businesses with this entirely new way of being, but inadvertently they start businesses exactly like the ones they hated. And I think this is a big reason for entrepreneurial failure, is that it just becomes exhausting. Like, I'm going to assume you have an idea about sales, marketing, product development, some of those sorts of things. Where the skills are lacking is in understanding what kinds of people fit here. What kinds of children can we put inside our sandpit in the first place? What even is our sandpit? What are the characteristics of this organization that we've built? We hire on skills and experience instead. And we make a big mistake. Sometimes we get it right, but it's never a panacea, believe me. I've done this. The secret to what we're doing wrong might be encapsulated in a very simple thing that I call the myth of work-life balance. Now, we speak about balance as if it is a panacea, actually, to use that word again, as if because work is so hard and so arduous and so tiring and so exhausting and demands so much of us, that the solution to that is to, I don't know, take up mountain biking or something, spend more time with the kids. I don't know what the idea there is. Listen, I've got 2 small children, I've got 2 small businesses, I don't have balance. But funnily enough, I'm a pretty happy guy. I don't think we're looking in the right places when we start speaking like this. I think the reason we talk about work-life balance at all is very simply because work doesn't feel enough like life. And here's what I mean by that. I'm an adult, right? I mean, with this hair, there's no denying that anymore. It's kind of a George Clooney thing going on there, right? Come on, I'm being nice to you. Anyway. Well, what it means, there are certain things that I expect in my adult life, okay? I mean, I'm the head of a, co-head of a household. Oh, she's not here. I'm the head of a household. We're not recording this, right? And that means there are certain things I take for granted. I mean, there's a patch of land that is mine. I have little people, I have animals. I can paint the walls purple within that if I want, and there's really only one person I need to consult. Generally speaking, that household runs very well. I'm able to take that kind of responsibility. There's trust in my relationship with my wife. I mean, I hope it's the same for you, but I don't just mean in terms of fidelity. I mean, Linda takes care of some of the bills, I take care of others. We don't have a lot of status update meetings at home to see whether stuff has been done. We don't fill in a lot of Excel spreadsheets. She's got my back, I've got hers, we know it, and so it runs. My opinion is valued in the house. I mean, I don't always have the dominant voice. About what generally happens is we discuss it and then do what she wants, but you know how that goes. But it's rare that anything happens under my roof that I know absolutely nothing about unless it's a deliberate surprise. And the best part about being an adult is that I get to pick who I spend time with. If I like you, let's be friends. Let's do braais. Let's go watch rugby together. If I don't have to call you. The best thing about being an adult. That's my life, and you can believe I'm engaged in that. I built it, it's tailor-made, it's mine, it fits me. And if something doesn't start or stops working in it, or something goes a little bit wrong, I'm really, really actively involved in putting that right. But when I come to work, something quite different happens. Far from being the head of a household, my status is dictated by somebody else entirely, and it often has absolutely nothing to do with the way in which I perceive it. The manifestation is like the desk and the chair in the corner of the room in which they're placed. There's no trust. I mean, it's not that you don't trust me. It's just that in a bid to get rid of any kind of potential defects or obviate any sort of bottlenecks in the organization, I'm told to follow processes, follow the rules, and those sorts of things. Now listen, I don't have any problem whatsoever with processes, generally. I mean, if we don't have processes, we don't know how to replicate yesterday's work, right? I don't have any problem with rules and regulations. If we don't have any, I don't know where to turn up on Monday. It's the number of these things and the spirit in which they're created, the philosophy, the thinking behind them in the first place, and that's generally buried in our lack of trust. And we've all been victims of this, guys. Try and return a pair of pants to Edgar's. Make sure they're in the right packet. Make sure they haven't been worn. Make sure they got the labels. Make sure you got the receipt. Why? I don't know. I mean, we make customer rules, we make employee rules to protect ourselves against the 3% of people who might mess us around, all the while handcuffing the 97% who would never have done it without the rule in the first place. It's a fact. Nice to work that way, hey. My opinion is never asked for in the organization. And again, it's not that you don't care, it's just there's rarely a mechanism to get to it in the first place, and even if there is a mechanism, I don't really believe you're listening. That's just my life as an employee. But if I don't believe you're listening and I don't offer my opinions up, and you're not trusting me to use my intuitiveness, my humanness, how do you want me to take ownership in the first place? The very things we're aiming to get, the behaviors we want, are ones that we crush out of the organization simply because of the way we've written policies. And then, this is the doozy, far from being able to pick who I spend time with, at work what happens on Monday morning is the boss turns up and says, here's Kevin, make him feel at home. There's nobody called Kevin here, is there? Because I could always change it to Martin. It doesn't make any difference. The problem with it is I didn't pick Kevin. I don't really like Kevin all that much. I mean, Kevin's fine, I guess, but over time I tolerate him. I put up with him. He's just all right. But I spend 8 hours a day walking around the same piece of carpet with this guy and a whole bunch of others. What it means is that when I come to work, I put on my work hat. I don't mind being there. I'm not trying to do a bad job. I am trying to get ahead. But you know, one observation that came out of the research that I did is that, and this was something that was quite startling, but it came up again and again. I mean, I'm paraphrasing it, but it goes something like this, that within about 18 months, all employees slightly resent you for hiring them in the first place. Because the sheen's worn off. The excitement has worn off. The bright-eyed, bushy-tailed nature with which they walk through the door going is brilliant has been absolutely flattened out by do this, don't do that, think this way, don't think that way, and by the way, the photocopier doesn't work again, and there's no milk, and all of these irritations become the narrative. If we're going to create organizations where happiness is possible in the first place, we need to do something different. And the best solution I can think of is this one. We need a different model of leadership. We need a different definition for what that actually is. Now, interestingly, when I suggested this, I was on Bruce Whitfield's show on 702 a year or so ago, and I said, this is the thing, that leadership should be all about managing culture. And he said, well, there's probably about 50 CEOs driving their cars into trees at the very thought of that right now. Surely they should be interested in finance. Surely they should be interested in product development, all of those sorts of things. My answer to that is absolutely, those are real and those are very, very important. But the truth of the matter is they are all byproducts of what happens at the employee engagement level. And if you focus on those sorts of things, all you do is give yourself an upstream problem, which is your people. If you sort the culture out, you can start to look for ways to drive engagement. If you can drive engagement, people will make the journey with you. It's not pie in the sky, guys. We see this happen in great businesses, great South African businesses. So I wish I could stay with you longer and take you through all of the thinking, but there are 5 major observations that came out of this. These aren't rocket science, but the application of them can be really seriously interesting. I'm going to take you through all 5, but I'm going to stop on 3 because I just feel a little bit mischievous this afternoon. It might be quite ticklish. So the first one, that organizations that drive high levels of engagement, that create organizations that create environments where happiness is possible in the first place, is that they are willing to extend trust. One cannot earn trust unless one has been given some trust. You'd be surprised. Small things, guys, always small things. Don't give people the keys to the computer room. Enable them in little ways. Build them up. There's a remarkable number of stories that came out of this about how a little bit of trust led to better dress sense, better timekeeping, all sorts of things. Things just started to happen because people began to feel like adults. What a surprise. The second one is what I call a taste for adult thinking. Most organizations are quite good at training. Some very good at it, some not so good, but most organizations are relatively good at it. But not many organizations are very good at learning. Learning organizations are, by definition, very high engagement drivers. They're organizations that have an ability to listen to the inner voices, all of those voices in the organization, and say, you've got a brain behind that voice. I'd be interested in knowing what your experience is prior to coming here. Tell us about this scenario. And they create mechanisms in order to get to those things. From Investec to Ovations Group to Prime Media, there are brilliant examples of simple things that people have done, and the stuff that they've managed to learn along the way about their own organizations, which would otherwise be hidden to them, is utterly remarkable. This is a third one, and I said I'd stop at this because this is actually quite important to me. In my travels, not necessarily during this research, because I was quite specific about where I went. I went to Investec, I went to Pick n Pay, I went to the Moyo restaurant chain, I went to Spur, I went to Comair, I went all over the place. I went to 67, 70 organizations in the end. But I avoided the ones that I thought were the biggest abusers. This definition of hierarchy, or how we roll it out in organizations, is often the biggest stumbling block of all. Now, organizations are hierarchical by nature. There's nothing wrong with that per se. Somebody sits at the top, takes the biggest amount of risk, dies of a heart attack at 45 or something. They get paid lots of money for that. Further down the line, we want more people to do it. By definition, it is a hierarchy. But organizations that drive higher levels of engagement than the average are ones that are able to make that feel like that. Classic case in point. At Investec, Steve Kosseff, the CEO, sits at exactly the same desk and chair as the guy in the call center. It means a couple of things, right? It means the guy in the call center has a really sweet desk and chair. But it also means the norms of hierarchy, the trappings of wealth that go on inside corporate offices don't exist there. At Pastel, Softline Pastel, Steve Cohen doesn't even have an office, much less a desk and chair. He just sits wherever he can. As far as he's concerned, it doesn't do anything at all to diminish the chain of command. In fact, it strengthens it. But you know, this stuff can go horribly wrong. There is a mining company. I won't tell you which one it is. It's downtown Joburg. One of the things that they have there as part of the hierarchy is that when you're at the senior level, and I'm not sure they do it anymore, but this was not that long ago. Senior level, you get wall-to-wall carpet. Second level down, you get a rug in your office. It's important that we maintain status, right? Somebody gets promoted one day. No, stick with me because this gets worse. Somebody gets promoted one day not to senior level. The only office available has wall-to-wall carpet. It is a dilemma. But they got around it by sending in a maintenance guy with a Stanley knife to cut the carpet away from the wall and turn it into a rug.
Are you kidding?
I mean, I'm telling you, guys, I've seen corporate offices, executive floors, where the carpet is so plush, I mean, so thick and so lovely, you sink in up to your knees. You know, and they're all drinking chilled Evian out of cut crystal glasses, and like there's all this real art on the wall, and they say it's a great investment, but only 5 people are allowed to look at it. It gets an overhaul, 10 million rand every 2 years, so that it's really nice and plush. But the people downstairs are still sitting in the same decoration they've had for the last 10 years. What do you think's going to happen? Diminishing hierarchy, the effect of hierarchy, the feeling of hierarchy, without changing anything operationally, has an electrifying effect. Okay, last 2, respect for the two-way street. This is about growth. Did you know when the unions negotiate in Germany, they never put money on the table at all? All they're interested in for their members every year is growth. How are my people going to be better this year than they were last year for working here? It's a very interesting question, that. With growth, you're more marketable. Of course you're worth more. The money should flow. They don't get locked down in those sorts of things. There is ample evidence and tons of stories to support, and I believe this to the core of my being, that people who feel like they're growing in organizations have less requirement for more money and more investment pampering like that than people who do not. And the last one is this, and I could go on about this. Now, part of the work that we do, we've just created core values for LibFin. We're doing it for a company called Capri Exclusive Homeware. We've done this for a number of organizations. And one of the things that I'm absolutely obsessive about is this. Now, values are, of course, they're HR buzzwords, right? They're the most boring things in the world. We all know what happens. You come up by consensus with a bunch of blanded out words. You print them on mugs. You specifically choose the words, by the way, because when you organize them, the first letter of each word makes another word, right? Circle or something, I don't know, whatever. And that's what we do, and then we wonder why we don't know what we believe in or where we belong. I mean, it's lunacy. The way companies choose values, I have 2 little girls. If I was to describe them, the way companies choose values, I would go, well, they're female, they're bipedal, they're carbon-based, they have hair, their characteristics couldn't be more different. They are both so individually lovely and so unique. And if we get to the core of what that is, we begin to understand what our sandpit is all about in the first place. And once we've done that, we're able to find people like us. The examination process is often uncomfortable when it comes to declaring what core values actually are. The statements that we create around them are often uncomfortable. But by God, do they describe what this organization's actually about? And that is the key to it. That's the work that we do. That's the findings I got out of the research. I've got copies of the book outside if anybody would like to buy one. I'm that opportunistic. There's only about 40 of them, but they're out at the reception area, and my colleague Audrey here will help you out. But in the meantime, thank you very much, and it's been a great pleasure to present to you today.